This is a video about parting tools for wood turning, in other words to be used on a wood lathe. I've got a selection here of about a dozen tools that I've acquired over a 40-odd year period of wood turning, dabbling in wood turning. This is a subject that's been well covered on YouTube, so I won't spend a lot of time going over what other people have explained very well. I highly recommend a lot of these videos that are on YouTube, but I'll just run through quickly through my collection and speak a bit about the more unusual ones. The first one here is what's called a beading and parting tool. I wouldn't call it a parting tool because it's too wide, it doesn't produce a good result, wastes a lot of wood, and it's hard work. It's more suited for tenons and so on, like this, straight spindle work. The other name for it, the beading part, I don't think many people actually use it for that either. So it's generally for, in my opinion, for tenon. The next one is quite similar, more suitable for parting, but still quite wide and leaves a torn edge a lot of times. That's one of the biggest problems with parting tools, is they scrape or peel, and therefore they're prone to causing tear out. This is a most common type of parting tool that most people have, the diamond. I'm not sure that being diamond shaped makes it any better, and the tear out problem is just the same, but that is quite a common tool. The next one is just a straightforward tool. It's only made of carbon steel, so it doesn't stay sharp particularly long. With parting tools, they're just like any other lathe tool. The sharper they are, the better. The next one is a straight blade, but it's fairly thin. It's 3mm, just over 3mm thick. And this is the one I use most. It cuts really well, it's easy to use, doesn't waste much wood, and has probably the best result of that type of tool. The next one I acquired many years ago. I'm sure it was made by Robert Sorby. It was supposed to be the best thing in terms of parting tools ever. It didn't seem to take off particularly well. Some people didn't know how to use it, and another reason I think it's Robert Sorby is because they now have a very similar tool, although instead of having the flute on the long edge here like this is, and the way this works is that having that flute there, the groove up that long side, means that you end up with a sharp couple of ridges at the beginning of the tool. The idea there is that it cuts the fibres before removing them, so you don't get as much tear out. So it's supposed to leave a much smoother result. Robert Sorby, I believe, now have a tool out similar. Well, this one's 4mm, the new one is 2mm, and I think that instead of putting the flute on this long side, they now put it on that bevel, and the tool's used that way up. I've not actually used it myself, but I've seen reports that it does a good job. However, the price tag on those is about £80 new, so I'm not sure that that's justified, nevertheless. So moving on to the next ones, these are homemade from circular saw blades, actually two different saw blades, and it's surprising what a difference in performance these two are, or have. The one on the right here has a more slanted angle on the tungsten, whereas this one has a flatter profile, and I find that the one that's angled is very grubby, and much prefer the other one. So but they do cut quite well with having the sharp tungsten tip on, and you get the clearance, so they do work quite well. Then we have an old favourite, the old power hacksaw blade, to sharpen to a point. The only thing, this cuts quite well with a thin kerf, but one thing I would mention is that when grinding these, it's important not just to grind the tip, but also make sure that this front face is ground as well, so that you end up with sharp sides. If you don't do that, it tends to bind up more and you get a lot of friction, and it doesn't work particularly well. Then we move on to one that I've done. I've seen where people make parting tools out of not just circular saw blades but also hand saws, and then put a handle on. I thought, well, why put a handle on when we've already got one? So what I've done here is just cut that shape out of a circular saw that was going in the waste bin. Cost me nothing, and within 5 minutes of using an angle grinder on that, I had a working tool. And here's two versions of it. One has a long tip, the other one's the points ground back. In terms of performance, I find that they both basically the same. There's virtually nothing between them. So that kind of sums up my collection of parting tools. I'll just do a quick demo on a couple of them and take it from there. Okay, so starting with the conventional tool, the 3.5mm flat chisel. Blade's doing about 1600 RPM in case anybody's interested. You do get a bit of tear out with it, but cuts very well. Then the fluted parting tool, the flute on top. Quite a smooth finish, not a lot to do there. And then finally we have the ultra thin blade. Obviously the ultra thin blade is quite useful for things like boxes where you want the grain to be as continuous as possible, so lose as little as possible in the cutting. Very little tear out, if any, on that outer edge there. The finish is quite good. It wouldn't take a lot of sanding to sort that out, so quite a useful tool which basically costs nothing to make. Thanks for watching.